Hello and welcome to Unscripted Abbreviated on Saturday, the 27th of July. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Gavin Ashenden.
Well, the news everywhere is about the opening ceremony of the Paris Olympics, Gavin, which began with, amongst other things, a parody of the Lord's Supper with lots of people dressed, men dressed as women, women dressed as men, a child in the mix. Really sacrilegious. And Christians everywhere are shocked and horrified. Although I suppose we should say unsurprised. Bishop Barron then came out and did a short commentary on it and said that what they've done is they've made clear who their enemy is. They've named it. So, of course, here we are. The enemy is the Catholic Church. The enemy is the Mass. The enemy is Jesus Christ because it's demonic. And he also said, as a sort of rallying cry, that we shouldn't be quiet about this. We should make our voices heard. And a lot of people have been making their voices heard about this and commenting. I think there's been petitions and all sorts, but it was very shocking. And Bishop Barron was right, wasn't he, to say, well, they've made clear who their enemy is.
Catherine, I'm so impressed with Bishop Barron. There are times when he really nails it with a degree of insight and intellectual rigor. And he's done it this time, because the easy thing would be for us to be so offended that we rocked back one more blow to everything we find precious and we love. I was in a GB News interview with the president of the Oxford Islamic Centre who got apoplectic on behalf of us, because he said, this is our prophet, how dare they? And it was quite nice to see him taking our side. But actually what Bishop Barron did was to expose what lies at the heart of this culture war. He exposed the fact that they're frightened of us. We're their main enemy. It's very easy to experience this constant aggravation that we have at the hands of people who are pushing secularized sexuality and secular politics, as if somehow we're being chipped away at by people throwing stones at the paintwork of a vehicle we love, to use a silly analogy. Actually, what we're finding is we are their greatest threat. They're terrified of us. And one of the reasons that they came out and they chose to use this extraordinary, iconic moment, the opening of the Olympics, where all kinds of possible dramas were available to them. When it happened in Britain, in a rather kitsch way, we had all kinds of nurses and doctors jumping up and down on NHS beds to show how much we love, the goddess NHS. And it absolutely expressed what was at the heart of English preoccupation and to whom we looked most of all in terms of propitiating what we needed. But this, they went straight for the nuclear option of denigrating Jesus, denigrating the Last Supper, denigrating the Mass, denigrating the Catholic Church. Why did they do that? Because they're afraid. Because they're afraid that if we take the gloves off and we raise our voices, if we begin to tell the truth about the lasciviousness, the perversity, the way in which they're trying to sexualize and capture children, they even put a child at the center of this tableau today for the opening service, then they're afraid that if we tell the truth, we will open the eyes of people to the extent to which the human heart has become perverse in the way it's handling sexuality above all. And the way it's frightened of Jesus in the Mass, or they wouldn't have attacked it as a centerpiece for their propaganda.
Yes, in a way, it's quite good that it's out in the open, and it's sort of been creeping towards this very explicit point. We spoke just a couple of months ago about the Eurovision Song Contest and the demonic entry from Ireland. Margaret Sanger, of course, famous abortionist and eugenicist and a feminist, said that the Catholic Church remains the greatest obstacle to the realisation of her aims. She recognised that years ago. The Church faced persecutions in France during the Revolution. They would do Republican baptisms by drowning priests, Republican marriage. It's mocking the sacraments. There is no doubt about it. If we didn't see it before, I hope we see it clearly now, that it is the Catholic Church. It is the sacraments. It is the Mass. It is the invisible become visible that they are attacking, the reality of that. And I think we spoke just a couple of days ago about the new convent in the north of England this wonderful Benedictine abbey, and the sisters of, who are they called, Gavin? The wonderful nuns.
I think they're the Benedictine Sisters of Mary, I think.
Yes, I think they are. This wonderful group of young nuns with a median age under 30. And during our conversation, we said, we mustn't forget what monasteries are for, to contact nuns, monks, ask them to pray. We need to increase our prayer. We need to have masses said. This is the way to win the war. The way to win the war is to be saints. And that's a call that goes out to every baptized Christian, to every one of us. We have been created to be saints. So at this time, it's no surprise that where evil abounds, grace abounds all the more. We have the worst that we've seen in this opening ceremony. The wonder of the increase in the pilgrimage to Chartres, young Orthodox priests, young men becoming priests, these young sisters of the Benedictines of Mary, who are young women who are on fire for Christ and giving themselves in vocation to him. So why? Because this is a battle, and we have to recognise our part in it, and most of all to pray, because they've showed us that they're frightened of this because it's real, because this is reality. This is not some game. And if they can see it's real, of course, the enemy believed in God. Jesus believed in the enemy, in the devil. So we can no longer say, oh, it's all old superstition. We don't have to worry about the demonic. Let's not mention it. This is a spiritual war. That's what's at stake. And that's the only way to fight it is striving for sanctity and becoming saints, and doing as Bishop Barron said, speaking up, being counted, and not shying away anymore.
Well, and that's what Catholic Unscripted and our small part, Catholic Abbreviators, is doing. It is, as you say, a war. I found myself being a bit ashamed, to be honest, when I listened to Bishop Barron. I thought, I've been really walking around this subject tenderly and carefully and sensitively. I've watched drag queens go for the kids in library hours. I've watched the way in which they've become more and more prominent in the public media, and I've wanted to talk compassionately and sensitively about different lifestyle choices and different preferences and different imaginations, and wanted to feel that actually we should be, above all, be being kind to these people. And in one sense, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with a bit of kindness and understanding. But I think what we saw at the Paris Olympics was that this is a war. It's a war on the Christ. It's a war on the church. It's a war on the Mass. And when I was talking on GB News earlier today, I was being really quite explicit about saying, if this is about free speech and if it's a war, then let the drag queen community hear we're coming for them. We're going to tell the truth about what they're really doing. We're going to ask constantly, why are they so preoccupied about children in their library hours? What is this constant putting children in the bullseye of their hypersexualized perversions? And then I was told, well, but Gavin, what about freedom of speech? I said, this is freedom of speech. They've exercised their freedom of speech. Now Christians are going to raise our voices. We're going to exercise our freedom of speech. We're going to call them out for their perversity. We're going to call them out for the way in which they've taken something that is essentially incredibly beautiful, the gift of sexuality, belonging as it properly does between a man and a woman in a marriage for the purpose of having children. And we're going to call them out for what they've done to it, because actually it's sick. And instead of saying, oh, well, perhaps they've got these imaginations in their heads where we ought to give them a little bit more space and understand how they got there, instead we're going to say, this is sick for them. It's sick for society. It's sick for our children. It's a disease. There's a certain kind of cyanide at the heart of all this, which is their attempt to sexualize children before puberty and to introduce them to the shameful perversity of a particular lifestyle. Now, so far, I think Christians have been very polite, very postural, very understanding, very gentle. We are going to continue to turn the other cheek. We're not going to take revenge. We're not going to assassinate them, bomb them, kill them. We're not going to hate them. We're going to love them enough to tell them the truth right between the eyes. And that, I think, is what Bishop Barron meant by saying, raise your voices, tell them the truth. It's the truth they're afraid of. They're afraid that they're practicing a form of transformation that is degradation. But the Mass that they made fun of, the Last Supper, which commemorates it, is a form of transformation on the inside. It's transformation versus degradation.
Yes, it's easy to think of child sacrifice as something like the Aztecs, and we no longer do that. Taking children up to the highest point and plunging a knife in their heart and ripping it out and offering it to the sun god. Well, we're far more civilized than that, aren't we? But if we can't see that this is sacrificing children on the altar of hedonism, then we are blind. If we don't see the millions, the tens of millions of abortions every year to make life more convenient for women as child sacrifice, we are blind. If we don't see the mutilation of our children, the twisting and turning and manipulating and sterilizing of our children as child sacrifice, we are blind. So we are practicing child sacrifice. And this is paedophilic as well. And actually paedophilic is a poor word because it implies love of children, Francophile, lover of France. These people do not love children. They wish to pervert children. And it's Luciferian because what it is, it's all playing into this suicidal mission. Lower birth rate, kill the babies, pervert the children, and then wipe humans off the face of the planet. Accompany it with some aggressive, tyrannical, non-stop bashing about the environment, and maybe in the end we'll all just be wiped out and destroyed in a blaze of perversion and hatred.
But I think one of the things I want to say too is the way in which they chose Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper, which is one of the most powerful Catholic pieces of iconography, preparing the way for what happens at the Mass, and the way in which the apostles were all going to become mass centers themselves as they went out and took this extraordinary miracle and planted churches around it. It's interesting that they don't choose a piece of Protestant symbolism for this. It's a Catholic church they're terrified of. It's a Catholic church's rituals. It's the mystery of transubstantiation that they want to mock and denigrate and dilute and make fun of. And actually, it's coming back on them because what they're going to find is that suddenly Catholics say, but this is so incredibly precious. I think one of the great problems in Catholicism at the moment is people who don't practice it, who don't practice it because they don't think it's precious enough. I'm hoping that one of the things that will happen amongst so many of non-practicing Catholics, when they see what this group of hate-filled, mocking, lascivious perverts are setting out to do, they'll say, actually, that's my Mass. That's the Catholic Church's Mass. I'm going to get on my bended knee before the Blessed Sacrament and be part of the crowd who adore this miracle that Jesus does by the Holy Spirit in the Mass every single Sunday. So I think, and I love Bishop Barron for this, I think it's a call to arms. It's a culture war. It's a war all the way down. It's a war we'll fight with prayer and nuns, as you say, but the Mass itself is the main instrument of this war, the very celebration of the Mass. They're terrified of it. Let's keep them terrified of it.
Yes, exactly. That's what I meant when I said we've got these nuns, we need to encourage prayer, we need to go to Mass. It's no good just saying I'm a cultural Christian or even I'm a nominal Catholic. We've got to the point where if you say you're Catholic, and I heard one priest. I wonder if it was Archbishop Fulton Sheen, or it might have been Bishop Barron. But anyway, one account of speaking to a young man in Italy. Hey, you're a Catholic. I'm a Catholic. Of course, we're all Catholics. And they said, oh, where do you go to Mass? And he said, hang on, I'm not that extreme. It's like, well, hang on. This is exactly the point. We can't just be nominal Catholics. The Mass is the threat. The more people we can get before our Blessed Lord in the sacrament to adore him is the restoration of right order that has been broken down through the fall and through turning towards. If you're not for God, you're against him. So we've either got to have right worship and be for God, or we will be playing into the hands of people that will end up doing this sort of thing. So yes, get back to the Mass, and yes, talking, speaking up, having our voices heard, and not letting our children be sacrificed and standing before them and shielding them. That's what we have to do. We have to protect our children. We have to stand before them. We have to be willing to lay down our lives to protect them, because they've made it absolutely clear, and it's only going to get worse.
I think one of the things we have to do is to tell the truth about sex and the imagination. The fact is that the outcomes of Christian morality, as Jordan Peterson would say, are really very good. If you have stable families with grandparents and great-grandparents, you have a hierarchy, if you like, a triangle of generations that look after each other. And in terms of stability, knowing who you are, and knowing who'll take care of you, knowing who'll be there for you, the extended family is one of the most powerful ways in which a community can build a foundation for it to function. It functions very well indeed. But at the other end of this, you have a form of solipsistic madness. You have children who, as they encounter the rocky terrain of puberty, which is never easy for anybody, finding themselves with anxieties deepened and intensified by people whose only concern is that it ends up as a form of perversity. In other words, to produce a kind of schizophrenia where the body and the mind are against each other. To some extent, same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria are both a form of schizophrenia, not in a technical sense, but in the sense that you have two personalities at war with each other. The mind and the body are, if you like, two different expressions of who you are, but instead of being combined, being on the same side, being able to coordinate and love and understand and amplify each other, they're in this terrifying war, which is in effect a kind of madness. We have to raise our voices and say, you're choosing madness for your children. You're choosing distress and disorder. They always tell us that if you don't listen to us, your kids are going to commit suicide. Do you know the opposite is true? But we never say so. We're too polite and too frightened. Instead of saying this is a complete bluff, all the statistics are this does not happen, we should say, do you know what the statistics really are?
Yeah.
The kids who kill themselves and take their lives are the kids you've lured into this terrible schizophrenic disorder because they find themselves utterly craving a degree of affection and identity that can't be provided while this inner identitarian war is taking place. We've been too gentle with the statistics. We've been too gentle with the truth. We haven't gone out there and told people what the facts are. And I think that if there's any good side, and very often God waits until some fairly serious evil happens and then brings a profound good out of it. That's how he works. We may find that one of the goods that come out of this is, as Bishop Barron invites Catholics to do, to lift up our voices and start finding out what the truth is and telling the truth so that we can save our children from the different forms of schizophrenia that are being invoked for them by people who are hungry for perversion, for the wrong kind of transformation.
It's a strange thing, isn't it, that people's argument is, if you don't let us behave like animals, we might end up behaving like animals.
Yes.
If we can't be base and behave in this way, then be careful. And I think this, you're absolutely right. This is not the message we should be giving. We are base animals, beasts in Adam. It's Christ in us that elevates us, that says we don't give in to what may be those instincts, those those kind of innate desires. We don't give in to them just because we experience them. We recognize that we're fallen creatures and we let ourselves be lifted up in Christ. Only by God's grace can we achieve that at all. Like, it's so difficult. It's really difficult, but only by God's grace can we achieve that. So I think it's the wrong message to say, look, if you don't let them do this, they're going to go and commit suicide and rape people and trash stuff and go mentally ill. And seriously, is that our message? Come on, there's got to be something better than that. And we know there's something better than that. And the better than that is to give ourselves to Christ, to become a Catholic and to experience Christ in the sacraments and let him, his body, blood, soul and divinity, form our body, form our selves so that we are prepared for heaven. It's the only way. The word of God, yes, but with the body of Christ. It has to be the Catholic Church.
And I find it very helpful, this dichotomy between the animal and the angel. I remember the first time I heard it. I think actually it's C.S. Lewis who has publicized it, and I mean, like all good ideas, they're borrowed from somebody else who had them before. But if Lewis has publicized it, let us publicize Lewis, because when we look at people we find attractive and find beautiful, we see the most attractive and the most people always seem to me to have something angelic about them. And we often talk about it in that way, and particularly actually children, which is one of the reasons that Jesus said that their angels are particularly, but behold the face of God in heaven. And they are therefore particularly precious. But there's a kind of, by animalistic, we don't mean like pet dogs or pet cats. What we mean is red in tooth and claw. There's a red and tooth and claw animalistic voraciousness that is the other end of the angelic extreme. And what would you want for your children? Would you want your children to have this shimmering, angelic, translucent transformation of mind and soul? Or would you want them dragged into the gutter where it's red in tooth and claw with instincts that are simply ravenous and carnivorous in every single sense? I think we have to go out to people and say, let's put the invitation to be saved in a way that you can understand. Do you want your children to be sucked up into this animalistic, decadent whirlpool? Or would you like them to be the angels you know that they have it in them to become? And what is true for children is true for grown-ups as well. For each one of us, it's always the same thing. The struggle we have in our mind, the struggle with temptation, the struggle to be holy, the struggle against our baser instincts, which we all have and fight every single day, is the struggle between the animal and the angel. And what we saw in the opening ceremony was profoundly animalistic, voraciously red in tooth and claw. And what we see in the Mass is an invitation to share in the worship of the angels with our risen Lord. So I think we need to tell people, look, it's heaven or hell, animal or angel. Why don't you choose? You know what you really want, but if you want it, you're going to have to turn your back on what these people represent and what they're luring you into.
Which requires a deeper understanding of happiness, and not just this is a culture that has been sold for hundreds and hundreds of years, that it's pleasure, that pleasure is the root of happiness. And what people are finding is the more of that they get, the more they need to be satisfied more. Yes, it's a quick hit, but it's not long lasting. So really to think, you said not to be sucked up in this whirlpool, this whirlwind of like hedonism and self-indulgence. The reason people are sucked up in it is because they think that's the path to happiness. They're wrong, of course. It's an apparent good. It's not a real good. But you're right. And we need to be witness to what true joy, to what true happiness is, not just absence of suffering, but so that we can get to a place like St. Maximilian Kolbe got to in the concentration camps in Auschwitz, and step and say, take my life, not his, and pray with people at the end of their lives, and accompany them and love them and put yourself in a place of sacrifice for them. And to die, you know, they had to kill him in the end with an injection, I think, because he still didn't die of starvation, and he died with a smile on his face, because that's a deeper joy. That's the surprised by joy that C.S. Lewis talks about, to speak of him again. So to say, look, don't chase this empty pleasure that will satisfy you for 10 minutes and then be gone, and you'll have to get another hit like a drug. Try and seek real, long, deep, lasting joy and happiness, and you won't find it there, but you will find it in the Mass.
So, you know, we've been talking about the clash of civilizations. Well, in the Elon Musk conversation with Jordan Peterson, they talked about the crash of civilizations. And they said, and so let's invoke our fellow travelers, because neither Musk or Peterson are evidently Christians yet, although they have a great respect for Jesus. They both said so. But one of the things they talked about was the crash of civilization moment, that we're going over a civilization precipice. And the things that make for civilized living, art, beauty, order, truth, protection of children, education, they're under the most terrible threat. And what they said was that it's a pursuit of hedonism. So what I'm trying to do is build on the thought process that you've just brought to us, which you did really rather beautifully and in a very articulate way. They said this pursuit of hedonism instead of happiness that is creating the crash of civilizations. And what people need is a form of existential threat to wake them up to the fact that pursuing pleasure is actually very bad for them and bad for our society, and has the worst result. If you pursue pleasure, you don't get pleasure. You get decay. and a societal crash. And so I think I just want to say that what you expressed so beautifully, Elon Musk and Jordan Peterson tried to put into the right words as well, but with less elegance and less succinctness. And although we found ourselves getting bored with some of what they said because they were intensely clever, and I was a bit jealous, nonetheless there were moments when they absolutely hit the sweet spot, as you did just now. So let's remind ourselves, civilizational crash is what we're trying to hold at bay.
Yeah, and they, of course, had borrowed from Os Guinness, who coined that term civilizational moment. We'll leave it for now on Saturday, the 27th of July. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Do please visit our website, catholicunscripted.com, and pick up a membership. Silver or gold will give you access to daily news commentaries from myself and Gavin Ashenden, as well as exclusive blogs from Mark Lambert, who will be with shortly to have another conversation, because we're currently in Ireland doing a recce for a retreat that we are running in October. So more about that soon.
And Mark has a series of family birthdays, which is keeping him committed to the integrity of the extended family.
So we'll be back with more news about our upcoming retreats soon. Until then, thanks for watching. I'm Catherine Bennett.
I'm Gavin Ashenden.